The screams echo through burning streets. A mother clutches her child against a mud brick wall. Her hands are shaking. Blood runs down the cobblestones like rainwater. Outside, soldiers march in perfect formation. Their spears catch the firelight. The city that stood for 1,000 years is dying. And the man who ordered this, he's only 22 years old. His name is Alexander. And what he's about to do will make you question everything you learned in school. You know the story they told you. Alexander the Great, the legendary king, the brilliant military genius who united the world. They made him sound like a hero. They named cities after him. They put his face on coins. They wrote poems about his glory. Here's what they never told you. Alexander didn't unite the world. He drowned it in blood. Between 334 and 323 BC, one man led an army across 3 continents. He burned cities that had stood since the dawn of civilization. He slaughtered populations that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. And the worst part? Most of what he did was erased from the history books you read. This is the real story of Alexander the Great, and I promise you, you're not ready for this part. Let's go back to where it started. Macedonia, 336 BC. Alexander is 20 years old when his father is assassinated at a wedding, stabbed to death while everyone watches. Blood pools on the marble floor. Some say Alexander ordered the hit. We'll never know for sure. But what happens next tells you everything about who this young king really is. Within days, Alexander has every potential rival executed. His cousins, his father's other wives, their children. He's barely old enough to grow a beard, and he's already wading through family blood. His advisors tell him to secure Macedonia first, build alliances, move slowly. Alexander looks east instead, toward Persia, toward the richest empire the world has ever seen. His generals think he's insane. The Persian Empire controls everything from Egypt to India. Their army numbers in the millions. They have unlimited gold, unlimited resources. Alexander has 40,000 men. And something else. An ego the size of the known world. He doesn't just want to defeat Persia, he wants to become a god, and he doesn't care how many people have to die to make that happen. Spring 334 BC. Alexander crosses the Hellespont into Asia. The first thing he does, he drives his spear into the ground and declares all of Asia his property. Not a request, not a negotiation, a declaration. The Persian scouts watch from the hills. They send word back to their king. Some Greek boy is here with a small army. Should we be worried? They should have been terrified. Alexander's first major battle happens at the Granicus River. The Persians have the high ground. They have superior numbers. They have every advantage. It doesn't matter. Alexander leads the cavalry charge himself, straight into the Persian center. His helmet gets smashed. He takes a sword blow that nearly splits his skull. He doesn't stop. Within hours, the Persian army is fleeing. Alexander orders his men to hunt them down, every single one. But here's where the story gets dark. After the battle, Alexander finds Greek mercenaries who'd been fighting for Persia. These are his own people, Greeks who needed work and took Persian gold. Does Alexander forgive them, welcome them back? No. He chains them all together, 2,000 men, and ships them back to Macedonia as slaves, to die in the mines. His message is clear: loyalty to Alexander or death. And this is just the beginning. City after city falls. Sardis, Ephesus, Miletus, each one the same pattern: surrender or burn. Most surrender. The smart ones, anyway. But then Alexander reaches Halicarnassus.
This city decides to fight. Big mistake. Alexander's siege engines pound the walls for weeks, day and night. The sound of crashing stone becomes the city's heartbeat. When the walls finally break, Alexander's men pour through like a flood. What happens next was kept out of most history books. The soldiers don't just take the city, they erase it. Every building burned, every temple desecrated, every person who didn't flee in time becomes a casualty statistic. The ancient sources mention it briefly, casually, like it's normal. The city was taken, its defenders were put to the sword. That's the historian's way of saying thousands of people were butchered in the streets. Old men, women, children who couldn't run fast enough. But Alexander isn't done. He's moving south now, toward the jewel of the Mediterranean, Tyre. This city sits on an island, impregnable, protected by the sea itself. They laugh at Alexander when he demands surrender. "You can't touch us," they say, "we're protected by the ocean." Alexander looks at the water between the shore and the city. Half a mile of sea. He smiles. "Then I'll remove the ocean." What Alexander does next defies belief. He orders his engineers to build a causeway, a bridge of stone and timber stretching across the water to Tyre's walls. His men think he's lost his mind. "You can't build a bridge across the ocean." "Watch me," Alexander says. For 7 months his army works. They tear down abandoned cities nearby, stone by stone. They dump the rubble into the sea. Trees are cut down and driven into the seabed as supports. The people of Tyre watch from their walls. At first they laugh, then they worry, then they panic. Because the impossible is happening. The bridge is growing, meter by meter, day by day. Tyre's defenders start shooting flaming arrows at the workers. Alexander builds movable towers to protect them. They roll ships alongside the causeway to attack. Alexander builds his own navy to fight them off. Nothing stops the construction. Nothing stops Alexander. January 322 BC. The causeway reaches Tyre's walls. The city that thought it was impossible realizes it's about to die. Alexander's siege towers roll across the bridge. His rams begin pounding the walls. His soldiers scaled the fortifications under a rain of arrows and burning oil. When the walls finally break, Alexander's men pour through like flood. What happens next was kept out of most history books. The soldiers don't just take the city. They erase it. Every building burned, every temple desecrated, every person who didn't flee in time becomes a casualty statistic. The ancient sources mention it briefly, casually, like it's normal. The city was taken, its defenders were put to the sword. That's the historian's way of saying thousands of people were butchered in the streets. Old men, women, children who couldn't run fast enough. But Alexander isn't done. He's moving south now, toward the jewel of the Mediterranean, Tyre. This city sits on an island, impregnable, protected by the sea itself. They laugh at Alexander when he demands surrender. "You can't touch us," they say, "we're protected by the ocean." Alexander looks at the water between the shore and the city. Half a mile of sea. He smiles. "Then I'll remove the ocean." What Alexander does next defies belief. He orders his engineers to build a causeway, a bridge of stone and timber stretching across the water to Tyre's walls. His men think he's lost his mind. "You can't build a bridge across the ocean." "Watch me," Alexander says. For 7 months his army works. They tear down abandoned cities nearby, stone by stone. They dump the rubble into the sea. Trees are cut down and driven into the seabed as supports. The people of Tyre watch from their walls. At first they laugh, then they worry, then they panic, because the impossible is happening. The bridge is growing, meter by meter, day by day. Tyre's defenders start shooting flaming arrows at the workers. Alexander builds movable powers to protect them. They roll ships alongside the causeway to attack. Alexander builds his own navy to fight them off. Nothing stops the construction. Nothing stops Alexander. January 332 BC. The causeway reaches Tyre's walls. The city that thought it was untouchable realizes it's about to die. Alexander's siege towers roll across the bridge. His rams begin pounding the walls. His soldiers scale the fortifications under a rain of arrows and burning oil. When the walls break, Alexander gives an order that still echoes through history. Kill them all. Not the soldiers, everyone. His men flood into the city like wolves into a sheep pen. The streets become rivers of blood. The screaming doesn't stop for hours. 8,000 people are slaughtered that day. 30,000 more, everyone who survived, are sold into slavery. The city that stood for 2,500 years is annihilated in a single afternoon. And historians still call Alexander great. Think about that. But Alexander's not satisfied. Tyre was just practice. He turns east again, toward the heart of Persia itself. November 333 BC, the Battle of Issus. This is where Alexander faces Darius III, the Persian emperor, for the first time. The Persian army is massive. They outnumber Alexander's forces 3-1. Darius sits on a golden chariot surrounded by his royal guard. His army stretches from one end of the plain to the other. It looks like a sure thing. It isn't. Alexander does what he always does, the unexpected. He leads his cavalry in a wedge formation straight at Darius himself, ignoring the rest of the battle, targeting the king. It's brilliant and insane in equal measure. The Persian royal guard fights desperately to protect their emperor. Bodies pile up around Darius's chariot, but Alexander's cavalry keeps pushing forward, closer, closer. Darius can see Alexander's face through the chaos, see those eyes that never blink, never show fear. And Darius breaks. He abandons his army, his chariot, his family. He runs. The emperor of the largest empire on earth runs from a 23-year-old Macedonian king. When the Persian army sees their god-king fleeing, they collapse. The battle becomes a massacre. Alexander's men chase the retreating Persians for miles, cutting them down from behind. The ancient sources say 50,000 Persians die that day. 50,000 in a single afternoon. But here's the part that really shows you who Alexander is. He captures Darius's family, his mother, his wife, his daughters. Does he execute them? Ransom them? Use them as hostages? No. He treats them with perfect courtesy, gives them royal accommodations, respects their dignity. Why? Because Alexander doesn't just want to defeat Persia, he wants to become Persia. He wants the Persians to see him as their rightful king, not a conqueror, a liberator. It's brilliant propaganda. It's also completely false. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Alexander didn't free anyone. He replaced one tyrant with another, himself. Every city that welcomed him as a liberator soon learned the truth. Alexander's taxes were just as heavy as Persian taxes. His governors were just as corrupt. His soldiers took what they wanted. The only difference? The cruelty now came with a Greek accent. But the worst was still coming. October 331 BC, the Battle of Gaugamela. This is Darius's last stand. He's assembled an army of over 100,000 men, war elephants, scythe chariots, the elite Persian immortals. Everything Persia has left. It's not enough. Alexander wins again through tactical genius and sheer audacity. Darius flees again. This time his own generals murder him before Alexander can capture him. The Persian Empire falls. Alexander is now the most powerful man in the known world, and he's 25 years old. What does he do with this power? He marches to Persepolis, the Persian capital, the city of palaces, the jewel of the ancient world. This city never resisted Alexander. Its gates were open, its people were peaceful. Alexander burns it to the ground anyway. The ancient sources try to sanitize this. They say it was an accident, a drunken party that got out of hand. That's a lie. The burning of Persepolis was deliberate, systematic, complete. Alexander's soldiers loot the royal treasury first, thousands of tons of gold and silver. Then they torch everything else. The palaces that took 150 years burn in a single night. Why? Because Alexander wants to send a message, not to Persia. Persia is already defeated. To everyone else. This is what happens to empires that oppose me. The light from burning Persepolis can be seen for 50 miles. That's not conquest. That's terror. But Alexander can't stop. He's conquered Persia. He's achieved what everyone said was impossible. A normal person would go home, enjoy the victory, live in peace. Alexander pushes east, into Afghanistan, into Central Asia, into places the Greeks didn't even have names for. His men are exhausted. They've been marching and fighting for 10 years straight. They're thousands of miles from home. They want to see their families. Alexander doesn't care. We keep going, he says, until we reach the edge of the world. His army trudges through deserts, over mountains, through snowstorms that freeze men in their sleep. They encounter tribes who've never heard of Greece, of Macedonia, of Alexander. It doesn't matter. Alexander attacks them anyway. He's not fighting for territory anymore, not for wealth, not for strategy. He's fighting because he can't stop. He's addicted to conquest. The casualties mount, not from grand battles anymore, from small skirmishes, from disease, from accidents, from exhaustion. Men die in their tents, in mountain passes, in forgotten valleys. For what? For one man's ego. Then comes the moment that shows how far Alexander has fallen. 328 BC, a feast in Samarkand. Alexander is drunk. His generals are with him, including Clytus the Black. Clytus saved Alexander's life at the Granicus River. He's one of Alexander's oldest friends, a father figure. The wine flows. The conversation turns to Alexander's achievements. Some of the younger officers start praising Alexander, comparing him to the gods, saying he's surpassed his father Philip. Clytus has had enough. "You think you did this alone?" he shouts. "Your father built the army you inherited. Macedonians bleed and die while you dress like a Persian and demand we bow to you like you're some Eastern king." The room goes silent. Alexander's face darkens. "Get out," he says quietly. Clytus doesn't move. "You've forgotten who you are, Alexander. You've forgotten where you came from." What happens next takes 5 seconds. Alexander grabs a spear from a guard and drives it through Clytus's chest. His friend, his savior, dead on the floor because he told Alexander the truth. The room is frozen in horror. Alexander looks at his hands, at the blood. Then he collapses, sobbing. He spends the next 3 days in his tent, refusing to eat, calling Clytus's name. Some say it was genuine remorse. Others say it was just the realization that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Either way, the message is clear. No one is safe, not even Alexander's friends. Loyalty means nothing. Truth means nothing.
Only Alexander's will matters. Summer, 326 BC. Alexander reaches India, the edge of the known world according to Greek maps. His army has been marching for 10 years, 10 years of blood and death and brutality. They've conquered everything from Greece to the Indus River, and Alexander wants more. He faces King Porus on the banks of the Hydaspes River. Porus has something Alexander's never fought before: war elephants. Dozens of them, massive beasts trained to trample infantry and terrify cavalry. It's the closest Alexander comes to losing. The battle is chaos. Horses scream and refuse to approach the elephants. Men are crushed under massive feet. Alexander's cavalry is scattered. But somehow, through luck and skill and sheer stubbornness, Alexander wins. Porus is captured. Alexander asks him how he wants to be treated. Like a king, Porus says. Alexander is impressed. He makes Porus his ally, gives him back his kingdom. It's one of the few merciful acts in Alexander's entire campaign. But even this has a dark side, because Porus is only spared so he can help Alexander conquer more of India. Alexander announces his next target, the Ganges River, the heart of India. That's when his army finally says no. The veterans gather. These are men who've followed Alexander for a decade, who've bled for him, killed for him, marched through hell for him. They're done. Their spokesman approaches Alexander's tent. "We won't march any further," he says. "We're going home." Alexander is furious. "Cowards," he screams. "After everything we've achieved, you want to quit now?" "We've achieved enough," the veteran says quietly. "We want to see our families before we die." Alexander tries everything. He promises more gold, more glory. He begs, he threatens. Nothing works. For 3 days, Alexander refuses to leave his tent, like a child throwing a tantrum. Finally, he emerges. "Fine," he says, "we'll go home." But it's not over, because Alexander doesn't march his army back the way they came. That would be too easy. Instead, he takes them through the Gedrosian Desert, one of the harshest environments on Earth. No water, no shade, no food. Why? Some historians say Alexander was trying to prove he could do what even ancient Persian kings couldn't. Others say it was punishment. Punishment for refusing to follow him further, for daring to say no. The march through the Gedrosian Desert kills more men than any single battle in Alexander's campaigns. They die of thirst, of heat, of exhaustion. The sand is littered with bodies. 3/4 of Alexander's army, the army that conquered the known world, dies in that desert, not in glorious combat, in dust and misery and completely unnecessary suffering, because one man's pride was more important than thousands of lives. June 323 BC, Babylon. Alexander is planning his next campaign, Arabia, then maybe back west to conquer Italy and Carthage. The man can't stop, but his body can. After a banquet, Alexander develops a fever. At first it seems minor, but it gets worse, day by day. His generals gather around his bedside, watching their king, their god, waste away. Some whisper about poison, others blame disease. The truth? We'll never know. What we do know is this: on June 10th or 11th, 323 BC, Alexander the Great dies. He's 32 years old. He's conquered 3 continents. He's built an empire larger than any before it. And he dies without an heir, without a succession plan, without any thought for what comes after. "Who will rule when you're gone?" his generals asked in his final hours. Alexander's answer is the strongest. Those 2 words doom his empire.
Within hours of his death, his generals start fighting over the pieces. The empire that took 10 years to build tears itself apart in 10 minutes. The wars of the Diadachi, the successor wars, will rage for 40 years. Millions more will die, because one man conquered the world but never thought about what to do with it. So why do we call him great? Why does history remember Alexander as a hero? Here's the truth they don't want you to know. History is written by people who benefit from the story. After Alexander's death, his successors needed legitimacy. They needed to justify their own power. So they mythologized Alexander, made him a legend, a hero, a god. Greek and Roman historians followed suit. They focused on his military genius, his tactical brilliance, his ambition. They downplayed the massacres, the burned cities, the hundreds of thousands of dead. They turned genocide into glory. The medieval world inherited these stories. European empires loved them because Alexander's story justified their own conquests. "We're bringing civilization," they said, "just like Alexander." The truth? Alexander didn't bring civilization. He brought destruction. Every city he liberated was worse off after he left. His taxation was brutal. His governors were corrupt. His legacy was chaos. The cities he founded, dozens of them, all named Alexandria, were built on the ashes of the cities he destroyed. The unity he created lasted as long as his army held swords to people's throats. The moment he died, it all fell apart. Because you can't build anything lasting on corpses and fear. But here's why this matters today. We still glorify conquest. We still celebrate military genius without asking about the cost. We still teach children about Alexander's brilliance without teaching them about the oceans of blood he spilled to achieve it. Every statue of Alexander, every history book that calls him great, every movie that makes him look heroic, they're all lies. Or at least, they're incomplete truths, because Alexander wasn't great in any moral sense. He was great the way a hurricane is great, powerful, unstoppable, destructive. Does that mean he wasn't brilliant? No, his tactical mind was exceptional. His ability to inspire loyalty was remarkable. But brilliance in service of brutality is still brutality. And we need to stop pretending otherwise. The same pattern repeats throughout history. Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Caesar. We remember their conquests. We forget their victims. We celebrate the winners. We bury the dead. But those dead people mattered. The woman clutching her child in Tyre, the Persian soldier who died running from Gaugamela, the Macedonian veteran who died of thirst in the desert because Alexander's ego wouldn't let him take the safe route home. They all had names, families, dreams, and they all died for one man's ambition. So here's what I want you to remember. When someone tells you about a great conqueror, ask them, great for whom? Great at what cost? Who paid the price for all that greatness? Alexander changed the world, that's undeniable. But change isn't the same as improvement, and power isn't the same as righteousness. The next time you hear someone praise Alexander the Great, remember this. Greatness measured in conquered territory is just a fancy word for mass murder. Real greatness isn't measured in the enemies you defeat. It's measured in the people you help, the lives you improve, the world you leave behind. Alexander left behind a world drowning in blood. 32 years old, and he'd killed hundreds of thousands of people. For what? For glory that lasted exactly as long as his last heartbeat. That's not greatness. That's tragedy. And it's time we stopped calling it anything else. The man who conquered the world couldn't conquer his own ambition, and millions of people paid the price. Remember their names, even though history forgot them, because they're the ones who truly mattered, not the tyrant who killed them.